You guys. So before I started this tutorial, I was talking to my roommate. I was like, "Hey, make sure you don't come in because like I'm recording right now." And then it reminded me of this clip. Dude, I swear to God, that's like so hilarious. All right, anyway, so let's jump into it. So today we're going to be talking about how to make room in your mix. So this tutorial is going to be a little bit longer, just a forewarning, but it's super important, and I feel like a lot of artists can really use some tips and pointers and what's personally worked for me. So this is a track of mine. It's probably one of my best mix downs. It's called Smile, The World Needs It, and it's a drum and bass tune. And mixing drum and bass is just super hard off the bat already because you have so much going on in it. So if you can do a good mix down on like a drum and bass tune, I think you can do it on just about anything. So yeah, I'm gonna let you guys hear the track real quick and then we'll dive straight into it. All right, so yeah, and if you were to listen to this track on headphones too, you could really hear like the stereo depth and like how things are panned left and right and so on and so forth. This is a really quick pointer to point out too, is that a lot of people think that making the track sound good is in the master, and it's really not. It's in the mix down. If your mix down sounds like shit, everything else is going to sound like shit. So that's just rule of thumb off the bat. So I'm going to turn off um, my master chain just so my CPU doesn't like crash and bog down. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so let's hop straight into it. So I first and foremost want to start off with my snare. So let's go over the snare first. So my snare is exactly mono, stereo field, and let's check out the EQ on that because making room in your mix is more or less dependent upon where you place things in your stereo spectrum and then how you're EQing everything as well. So you want to cut and leave room for other instruments that you know are going to be more prioritized right there. So for my snare, even though I know it's the most important, I did like a little bump at let's see, what is that? 2.5K, because like right there is where the snares really cut through that, and like down here as well. But for vocals and snares and kicks, that's where they really cut through, is at that 2.5, anywhere from 2 to 3K. Over here I made a little bell curve, negative 300 hertz, because I felt like there was a bad frequency right there. But this is like really important too. So 11K and up, like I just have a low pass filter right there, because right there I want like some of my hi-hats to come through and some of the high end for like other instruments to come through as well. And then obviously you want to cut out all your low end. For this particular snare, I went up to 150 hertz. I want to leave that room for like the sub and some of the bass design, because some of the bass design comes in right there as well. So that's my snare, completely mono. What else I want to get into too is that my hi-hats, right? So I have two hi-hats going on right here, if you want to hear them real quick, and they kind of just pan left and right, and they just talk to each other throughout the track. So as you can hear, they're not really bright, and I chose for them to not be bright because I wanted the bass design to be bright. So for the Reese bass, I wanted that to have a little bit more high end information. So either you make your hi hats bright, or and then like your other bass design patches, like you kind of scoop out that high end, or like vice versa. So your bass design patches will have some of that higher end, and then your hi-hats won't. So you do that so things don't phase. If there's too much of the same frequency on your master, like the sounds will start phasing. And what phase means is pretty much like +1 plus -1 equals 0. So the sound will actually fade away because it's phasing with the other sounds. So like it'll actually die in volume inside of the mix. So that's why you want to make room, and that's why I ended up panning them too. So I have a stereo pan over here for +14 on the right, and then the other one is a +6 or -16 on the left. So one's pan right, one's pan left. So what that does is it allows room and depth, and it allows for my snares and my kicks to cut through right in the middle. So now I'm allowing room for my snares to be mono, and then my hi-hats or my shakers, whatever, they can be like a little bit out to the side, so that creates room for them. As well, in addition to that, for the stereo field, I didn't go completely mono. And this is debatable too, but for me, what I found was whenever I'm panning percussions, I don't like to go all the way mono because that just kind of centers it along with the snare and the kick. So I just left it out about 50 in the stereo field. So it's kind of in the middle, but it's like I found this nice sweet spot to where it's pretty much in the middle, but panned. So I'm allowing tons of room for other objects that I want to be mono as well. Let's see what this one's at. Yeah, this one's at 80. So it all really depends. People are like, oh yeah, no, your hi-hats have to be completely mono. Like it doesn't. That's just taking up more room for other elements to cut through. And as well, I seem to have them sidechain to my snare. So whenever my snare is hitting, these are ducking in volume as well, and we can kind of see that right here. So, and you always want to sidechain everything to your snare as well. Like my bass design patch is actually sidechained, I think, to my kick or my snare. Which one is it? Yeah, it's sidechained to my snare. So every time my snare hits, the bass design patch will duck. And I feel like that's super important because, especially for drum and bass, you're nodding along to the snare hit. And you're always going to nod along to the snare hit anyways, because that's what's going to lead and drive your track. And that's why you always got to sidechain it. Okay, so let's see, where should we go next? Let's see, what is this? Yeah, okay, this makes sense. Okay, so this is my main hi-hat that is going the whole time. And I believe this one is pretty much mono. Yeah, this one's super mono, and it's not panned at all because I want this one to be in the middle. I want this one to be the carrier, and then the ones on the outside are basically going to be fills. And since I have pretty much 3 hi-hats going, the EQ is what's really important on them. So for this one, I scooped out high pass all the way up to 450 hertz. Like I don't want that low information. Did a low pass on 14 hertz, and then that duck that we were talking about at 3K. And I did that because I don't want them. These 2 hi-hats right here, I don't want those to be like super bright in the mix because I want to allow that room for my snare to cut through. And in addition to that, I'm pretty sure. Let's see. Yeah. So this one is since this is the main one, the one that's sticking out in the middle. I wanted this one to have that high information. I of course I did a bell curve right here, 2 hertz, just to kind of duck it down because I don't want too many frequencies right there. But the low pass is going up to 1K, or sorry, high pass is going up to 1K, and the low pass is going down to 14. But I still have that 10, that 8, 6K information right here that I really want to stick out for the hi-hat. Yeah, and you can hear it too. Like it's pretty bright. So by me cutting and EQing these other hi-hats accordingly, I created room for the main one that I want to stick out. And so when you're doing all your EQ cuts, you have to keep in mind for everything else that you're doing, like which sound do you want to stand out the most in the mix? And then which one do you want to be tucked away in the background to kind of just fill up the space and be an additive to the main sound? So once you kind of figure out like think about mixing is like everything has its own layer. It's like making a sandwich or like a cheeseburger, whatever it is. Like figure out what you want to be up front, and then whatever else is like going to be at the bottom, then you can EQ that so the thing up front can shine and have that frequency space so it's not fighting for anything else. And if you're listening to the hi-hat, you can tell that the two over here that are pan, it's just an addition to the current one. And it's giving depth. And like they're not that loud. It's just basically giving depth to the tracks. And when you're panning things left and right, it creates like a nice dynamic for the track and for your listener, and it makes it a little bit more engaging for them. So that's the hi-hat. Let's go ahead and let's dive into this really dark, nasty Reese bass that I made. Okay, so correlation meters. If you're not using a correlation meter, dude, you gotta use it. The correlation meter they'll look different, but basically if you're 0 to 1, that means that if you convert your track into mono, then nothing is gonna phase. So if you're throwing a correlation meter on something and you're over here in the green, like that's good. Like if it gets over here, that's okay. But if you're ducking below 0, like that sound is going to phase once it's introduced into mono. So make sure you're always putting a correlation meter on all your bass design patches and even vocals, and just kind of see where they're sitting at in the spectrum. And that's what I use too to dictate where my sound is going to lie in the stereo spectrum. So, for example, I'll just show you guys real quick. So, 0.42. So if I bring the stereo out, it's just going to throw it out. It's just going to throw it out super far stereo, and then you can see like it's just phasing. Like the sound is pretty much just going to disappear when I put this track in mono. It will literally just disappear because it's pushed out so far stereo. So use a correlation meter. In this order, you want to put on your directional mixer. Every DAW is going to have its own different stereo mixer for it. So you want to put it on first and then your correlation meter afterwards. So you can play with this in real time and see what's going on. And I picked 42 for a specific reason. We'll get into it after this Reese bass, because I have a piano that's playing over this, and the piano is more far stereo, and the Reese bass I wanted to be more in the center, so I have room for the piano on the outside of the stereo field. But let's check out this EQ right quick. Yo, okay, yeah, so high pass up to 120, and then the low pass, dude, yeah, it's going down to 6K. So pretty much all that information is just out. The only reason why I bumped this up at the 2.5K hertz area is because when I designed the bass patch, it was just lacking some of that information, and I'll play it and you can visually see it on the EQ. So it was just kind of lacking it without it. Like without it, it sounds good, but I just really want a little bit more emphasis on that brightness right there, just so we can kind of cut through the mix and just kind of be out in the open. And then obviously the bell curve at 520 hertz without it. It just sounds like less muddy, and plus I wanted that room for the kick as well. And speaking of which, yeah, no, wait, no, never mind. Yeah, this isn't sidechain to my kick. Yeah, sidechain to my snare. Okay, so I was talking about how I have a piano as well that goes over it. So for the piano, it's at 0.60. But here, let me go ahead and throw a correlation meter on here real quick, and then you guys can see where it's sitting at in the stereo spectrum. Correlation meter. Okay, I'm going to put it all after that. Let me go ahead and solo this bad boy right quick. Yep, boy. Yep, right there. Okay, come on now. Whoa. All right, correlation meter and directional. All right, let's peep game on this route here. So it's like over here. So it's actually pretty far. When the stock plugin for the piano, like if I were to take off the directional mixer, it's so far stereo that is just phasing already. Yeah, it's just phasing already. It actually almost sounds like it's distorting. Hold on, let me see if it's peaking. No, it's just my saturation on it. Okay, anyways, derp derp derp. So that's why I ended up putting on my directional mixer and then pulling it in, because right off the bat, it was already phasing. So if you remember, my Reese bass was like around here on my stereo spectrum, and then the piano is like over here. So my Reese bass is more mono, and then the piano is a little bit more stereo out here. Right, so that already gives me room and depth within my mix already, because what I'm doing is I'm assigning each individual bass patch or any kind of instant its own place in the stereo spectrum, and that's what you want to do for a mix. You want to EQ and assign its own individual space in the spectrum, so everything has its own room and its own breath to breathe. And so with all that too, I believe I have a violin as well. But what I really want to show you guys is this melody right here that plays on like the second 16 bars of the drop. And I'll just solo those and play these together real quick. Okay, so what I'm trying to show you guys is this nice little melody right here. And I actually think when I created this track, I think I even put like an EQ automation that pulls this low pass backwards. I think it might... No, never mind. That's for another track. Okay, so let's look at this. So let's go ahead and grab another. Oh yeah, and by the way, like of course this is sidechain to my snare as well. Correlation meter. Bada boom, bada bang, bada bing, bada boom. Okay, let's check it out. Super mono. Super mono. And don't let this fool you. Just because it's set, like whenever you open up a directional mixer or any one, like it's always going to be set to 1. So don't let this fool you and say that like since you slapped it on it's already stereo. No, that's not the case, because when you're creating sound, so like I use Serum, you can detune your sound to the left and that pulls the unison further into mono. So whenever you detune it to the right, it's pulling it out stereo. So I knew that this melody, I pretty much wanted it as far center as I could get it. So then it's melody, Reese bass, and then on the outside my violins and my pianos. So that's how I wanted it all to kind of like unfold itself. So I knew by detuning it in Serum and pulling the unison in, I was going to monetize it. Monetize it? I feel like that's not the right word, because that means something else. Anyways. So yeah, so that makes sense. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's look at all these together. Let's go ahead and pull the correlation meter from over here. So we have the melody, we have that, and now we have the Reese bass. And then we'll go ahead and solo these hoes and watch them together. Okay, so now you can visually see where it's all at on the stereo spectrum. So I hope this gives a lot of insight to like the theory behind it all. So like, you know, I'll have a sound out here and then I'll have this sound super mono, and then I'll have a sound that's like right in the middle of the sweet spot, you know? So that's just creating depth and it's creating room. So that's super important. So yeah, I hope that helps. Every DAW has a stock correlation meter in it. It might be named something else, but figure out what it is and then go check it out. And then lastly, for the melody, just to kind of show you guys, so I kind of made room for the other sounds. I don't know why that's there. Basically, low pass, high pass up to 200, and then the low pass right here. What is that? 5K, pretty much 6K. And then I have another bell curve cutting it down. So then that way the Reese bass can kind of shine out right there. And so the snare can really cut through as well. And that's at 3K. I mainly bumped it down because I wanted this sound to be kind of tucked into the background. And it's just like my progression for my drop. I didn't want this to be up front and like in your face. No, like I wanted this to be tucked down behind the Reese bass, but pretty much in the same room as the piano. So in order to make room for the Reese bass, of course, bell curve, drop it down, 3K. Let's see. And then lastly, for the last 8 bars of the drop, I have this cool little wonky sound that I made. And then honestly, dude, I should have panned this. I should have panned it to like the right or something. All right, so let's check out where this is at on the correlation. It's in that nice little sweet spot, kind of around the Reese bass. This sound was like, it had like weird squeaky high end, but I kind of like how it worked in the mix. I basically only wanted the high mid information, mid high information of this sound. So low pass down to 11K, high pass up to 800 hertz, and then ducked it down to like 1K because I just felt like it was way too squeaky right there. So pretty much I just have this of the sound coming through because that's all I wanted from the sound. I wanted to keep room for my bass design patch and my piano and my kick and my bass line. And then I wanted to cut this down because I wanted to keep room for my hi-hats. Like I just wanted this little piece. And then when you hear it in like if you just listen to it alone, it just sounds like super flat and empty. But when you hear it in context with everything else, yeah, it sounds freaking sick. And as you can tell too, it's tucked down in the mix. It's definitely tucked down because like I don't want it to be up front in the mix. If I make it louder than everything else, then it's going to distract you from the whole vibe and the whole atmosphere that I'm trying to carry you with. So that's why whenever you're mixing, you got to find like the sweet spot for everything. Everything doesn't need to be loud. Like the whole part of mixing is making things quieter and louder and just creating that depth of field within your track. Yeah. So, and then of course too, that is sidechain everything, sidechain it to the snare, sidechain the living piss out of it. Yeah, and this was my kind of lead that I have carrying in the background. Did some dynamic EQ right there, brought out some, actually I think I want to bring that down. Yeah, it's filtered anyways. Yeah, because I just felt like there's too much mid information, and if I kept that mid information, then it's going to fight for room with my Reese bass, because my Reese bass is really strong right here. That's where it gets the nice prominent growl from. So I wanted to do a dynamic EQ to kind of duck it down after it gets up to a certain volume threshold. I'm actually going to bring it down a little bit more too. Sick. And then this one, since I'm not really, you want to sidechain things to your kick as well. Of course, my bass line sidechained to my kick, but I think what I ended up doing is I ended up sidechaining this sound to my kick as well. Yeah, it's going to my kick. Because like I still want my kick to stand through, and I'm sidechaining a lot to my snare, but for like the FX and some of the other things, I have a sidechain to the kick. And actually let's go ahead and real quick, I want to see where it's sitting at in the stereo spectrum. Yep, so a little bit right there. And the thing I like too about this pad synth thing is that like it bounces around as well, and you can create that through unison too. But yeah, it just creating more depth, man. So I'm gonna leave it at that. I think this is good enough to like get you guys started on being consciously aware of your mix downs and creating room and placement and EQing because it all plays a big part. So whatever sounds you want to stand out, keep those frequencies there, and then whatever sounds you want to be in the background that's going to carry your track, cut the EQ wherever, like for a snare, cut down at 3K, pull out your bell curve a little bit, just create the room for your snare to have that place, because it's all about placement and then cutting and stereoizing or monetizing, there we go again, and bringing things in mono, to create and just allow room for everything else to breathe. So yeah, I hope this helps you guys, and I'm gonna wrap it up. I don't want this to be too long. I know you guys got shit to do, or probably a lot of shit not to do, so I'm gonna leave you guys to your day. Thank you guys for tuning in, kicking it. I hope this helps a little bit. If you guys have any more questions, go ahead and comment them down below. Let me know what you guys think and all that jazz, and I will see you guys on the next one. Also, you guys can find the link to this track down in the description as well. So peace.